So welcome back to Humans in the Loop. I'm joined with Andrei here today. He's been kind enough to come and talk to us about supply chain, finance, and procurement. Andrei, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Matt. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrei Popov. I've spent pretty much coming up to 2 decades now in the CPG consumer goods industry. Gone independent a couple of years back and now helping one of my clients in the frozen foods industry with actually looking how we can optimize the latest developments and technology and AI, particularly in the consumer industry. Nice meeting you all.
Very good. Well, thanks for coming. Very interesting industry. Traditionally, quite a good adopter of technology. So one of the things that I'm going to start off today is thinking about the people that we need to get into this sort of AI space. There's lots of people like myself and yourself that love AI. We're probably that 15% that we hear about, but there's a 65% and more that are somewhat apprehensive. And I think that's a shame because I think, particularly in my age group, there's a lot of experience. And I have this sort of little formula. It's a bit cheesy, and I keep using it, but I believe it to be true, is that AI is a great opportunity because AI plus experience is wisdom at scale. And I think that combination of experience as AI is really important for the success of AI in an organization. What do you think? Where do you think the space of AI, what are you seeing in CPG in terms of adoption, and how do you see the community of users really embracing AI? What's motivating them? What's demotivating them?
Sure. I think it's a great observation, Matt. I think it's really a spectrum of, I suppose, the whole range of people who are very much inspired and driven and motivated to adopt and exploit the business benefits of the latest technological offering, probably to those who are a little bit on the fence or probably outright scared is not necessarily the right word, but see it as a threat. So what we're trying to do at the minute is really identify those potential champions for bringing this technology in the enterprise environment. And one of the motivations, I think, for us with my current client, who have a lot of kind of legacy complexity in how the business has grown over the last decade, it translates in a lot of overhead in transactional processing in finance, or potentially not as efficient ways of working in supply chain when it comes to demand planning or inventory management. So I think what we're trying to do is to identify, let's say, senior to middle management layer within the organization and partner with those folks who are really kind of motivated to almost leapfrog the traditional approach to this of saying, oh, let's go and centralize and consolidate our financial transactional processing. Let's outsource it to a lower cost location. And it's all kind of manual still effort to almost kind of leapfrog to the next generation right up front to go and say, how can we take this latest technological offering and almost kind of automate and agentic that into the seamless way of working, which is then delivering the real tangible business value. Because in a consumer company, fundamentally, at a senior level, and the senior managers are measured on the benefit that they can lend to P&L. So it's either selling more of our product and generating more revenue and growing the top line, or really optimizing the cost base and reducing the overheads and improving the efficiency of the business.
That's fascinating. And you know, when you look at these processes and applying AI, we had someone say something quite interesting about this. I wonder if you agree or disagree. They said, if you put AI on a great process or good process, it makes it great. If you put AI on a terrible process, it makes it catastrophic. It's an amplifier of that. I think you were sort of intimating towards that a few
Yeah,
moments
but
ago.
you'll probably remember some time back, few years back, there was a lot of wave and I suppose excitement about this technology of robotic process automation, right? And it was
Yes.
like
Yeah,
RPA
I
this
was
and
there.
RPA that, and then use this software and that software. But we always said, back in my days when I was in consulting some years now ago, we used to say, if you automate a mess, you get an automated mess. So you're
That's
never
it.
gonna get the real sort of neat and slick way of working, because you have to bring it back to the basics, to the bare bones, to really streamline the underlying business process.
Yeah.
And once you've done it, then you can put automation and everything else on top, and it becomes much more efficient, and then that's where you get the benefits.
Yeah. Speed up the mess. I was told that at the beginning of my career. Absolutely. When one of the things we're trying to explore is that I think is different, and again, I would be interested in your opinion, between something like AI and, let's say, an SAP project. SAP projects, predefined application. Lots of consultants have sat down to find the best practice, and then people are trained. Whereas, and it's pretty straightforward as an employee. I'm told what the application does. I'm trained on how it works. I'm told what my new process is. I might have some input into that in a workshop to sort of tweak it a little bit, but that's pretty much the way it works. With AI, it's different, I feel, and you may disagree with this, and I'd be welcoming your opinion, in that we've got a tool that is not predefined in the way it works, and so it requires a bit of a dialogue, for want of a better word, between the person who has the experience of that process and that someone who understands what the technology to do, not to speed it up, but almost reimagine that process. How do you see that? Well, first of all, do you agree with that? And then secondly, if you do, how do you see companies cultivating that sort of motivation within the employee environment to make that happen?
Well, I think for me, what you're touching on is fundamentally the change aspect of that. So what is the actual work that needs to go and put in place in order to ensure the successful adoption of technology? And it's interesting how you mentioned ERP and almost do a compare and contrast. So personally, I've been involved in quite a few ERP implementations, particularly probably in the last 6-5 years. And we always kind of used to say, in the context of any program, the tech part is easy. So if it doesn't work, we fix it, and then problem solved. But it's actually getting the business stakeholders and then the users of that application at the end of the day to change their ways of working and get that new technology adopted. That was the most difficult and the most challenging aspects of it, I think, in every ERP implementation. And a lot of the companies in CPG industry that I have a lot of network with today, they're embarking on this journey to S4HANA, and a lot of these programs are going wrong. They're not going wrong because there's difference or problems with the tech. They're going wrong because they haven't really nailed the business adoption dimension of that.
Right.
So I think with AI as a technology, it's very similar, if not even more amplified, because it's potentially got this kind of I suppose, image around it. Oh, this is gonna come and take all our jobs, and everything that comes with it. I think the motivational dimension to me is absolutely critical. But I think one way to try and probably get people inspired and excited about it is to position it to say, well, look, whatever you're doing day in, day out in your current day job, which is kind of transactional and non-value add, get it outsourced almost to an agent, and then free yourself up to go and do more interesting, exciting things, so it becomes liberating, as opposed to this becoming a sort of a threat of robot coming in and taking your job in the first place, if you see what I mean. So if it's positioned like that, then I think it has got a much better, stronger chance of success in the context of adoption, particularly in established companies like consumer goods industries, which have grown over many, many, many years. And I think they do carry some sort of overhead and a lot of people are employed. And I think actually getting people to see this as an opportunity as opposed to see it as a threat, I think that's the key to this.
And I love the way you framed that. And I think that's what we're looking for. It's how do you frame people to be motivated? Because I think it is, if it's not framed correctly, it naturally comes across as competition, like an electronic employee that's going to come take your job. And the news and the rhetoric around it just sort of supports that. But you're almost framing it as a actually no, this is something that's going to give you almost a promotion, right? We're going to give you electronic agents, that's the term, but to do the work that you were doing, to almost promote you to a level where that you can start to do what you're interested in, give the mundane to the AI, and more importantly, you're giving true value back to the organization. I think so. It's an interesting way of framing it. Any other? So if you're one of these people that are more skeptic, they see this. How do you kind of take them on that change management journey? It's interesting you say it's been a problem that's been around for a while. I think you're absolutely right. I've always said with any project, it's not the tech, it's the data and the culture. Data culture. I suppose AI is no different. Do you see a difference, and are there other things that we can do to sort of connect with those people and bring them on this journey?
I think the way to kind of address that is really through elevating the discussion into what I call the realm of art of the possible and inspiration. And I think really being able to demonstrate what are those value add things that can be done with this latest, greatest tech. So maybe just to add a perspective, we haven't quite started exploring that particular area, but I know some of the big players in CPG are already doing that because they are ahead of the game. It's probably got bigger budgets, and then they see the real value. But one particular use case that got me personally inspired a few months back, as I was talking to one of my contacts in my network, is that he was telling me how the big players like the Unilevers and Procter & Gamble's of the world, they're starting to look at what are the use cases for technology like AI, not so much in streamlining and automating the overheads and gaining the efficiencies in the cost reduction context, but more so in the context of launching a new product and product innovation. And I think what they're doing, they're basically saying, look, if we've got high quality first party consumer data, because access to high quality consumer data to CPG B2B businesses is historically also been a challenge. And what they're then doing, they're saying, how can we then run scenarios if we have an idea about a new product, whether it's a bottle of shampoo or packaged frozen food SKU, or a bottle of liquid, a lemonade, or wherever it may be. If we were to launch that product in a particular market, then they almost run real life scenarios using AI, deriving the attributes of that first party consumer data to project how successful a launch of that particular product would be if the product had these attributes, and if the consumers had certain data attributes, and are there any kind of matches or mismatches. And the use cases like that, what I think they can then do is really excite the overall employee population of a CPG company to go and say, well, look, we are fundamentally here to create more end product to our consumers, excite them about our innovation and launch them, and actually generate more revenue to increase our performance through increase of sales. So if the focus can be shifted from this is just kind of automation of redundant, repeatable transactional processing, into more excitement about new product launches and growing of top line, etc., then I think it can be effectively a major leverage and an advantage in promoting this technology, because it's potentially then removing and helping to remove this idea of it being a threat.
It's almost inspiring people to. It's a new way of doing business. It's inspiring. I like that, rather than we're going to deploy AI to gain efficiency. It's interesting you should say that. So I'm fortunate enough. I do work with a lot of those large CPGs, and we've just finished some big projects on that. And you're exactly right. A lot of them are indexing off of a study that was done with, I think it was Harvard Business School and Procter & Gamble last year. It was interesting. So they found if you applied AI to a business, this was operational processes. If you applied it to an operational process, it was about 17% gain in efficiency. But the interesting outcome of this was they noticed a 200% increase in effectiveness, right? And that bears truth for me, because in my many grey-haired years doing this, I've always come across the Pareto rule, which says that you spend 80% of your time working with the top 20% of filling the gap. Customer, partner, project, whatever, right? And the idea that I will send the AI to go after the other 80% is more powerful. And like you're saying, product. You know, I'm focused on this product. That's my 80-20. I could never do product ideation in this market because I just didn't have the volume of. I can now send AI to go do it. If I'm looking at procurement, I may not aggregate spend of all of these suppliers because I just don't have time to go through all these small suppliers. But I can get AI to do it. So I really agree with that, and I love the way you're reframing this and saying it's not about getting individual efficiency. It's about making you drive that effectiveness in the business. So anything else, and we're talking about that sort of how, any tips that you would have to sort of share with people on how you drive that practically? You know, I mean, you talked about use cases. You don't know what you don't know. Inspire people with use cases. Any other thing? And by the way, anything that you think we should avoid doing?
I think rather than what we should avoid, to me, when it comes to kind of adoption and success criteria for a successful sort of deployment and adoption of these technologies, it's really kind of the lessons I've learned, the hard yards I've learned in the ERP deployments. I think to me is always kind of a two-pronged approach. One is the senior executive sponsorship and the support from the top-down dimension. But the second one, which is probably even more important and critical, is what I call winning the hearts and minds of the people on the ground and fundamentally then the end users of whatever technology we are deploying, and the bottom up. And when these two things join up, the top-down sponsorship support and bottom-up buy-in into any change program through winning hearts and minds, that I think only then this can be a real success. So I think combining these two things to me is critical, because particularly in the companies in the industry like CPG, that has got very often a lot of brand tradition, a lot of legacy, a lot of pride about that. The change dimension shouldn't be underestimated. And I think I would rather focus kind of on over-indexing that before a project or initiative like that even begins, rather than under-index, because really kind of taking people by the hand and taking them on the journey is only then stand a real chance of success in anything like it.
I couldn't agree more. I think that is the question for this year, is how do you bring everybody on that journey? Now, you mentioned leadership top down, maybe there's a bit of bottom up. There's talk of this sort of changing. I think the vacuum here is that we need everybody to work together to reimagine what's possible. How do you see that working with, particularly some traditional companies where the leadership teams define the strategy and everyone goes executing it? I imagine these leaders sat in a room somewhere going, "Oh, where this is going," and it's evolving all the time. And knowing like Google, I mean, I wake up some mornings going, "Wow, I didn't know you could do that." So how do you create that, joint leadership in a space that's constantly changing.
Yeah, I think this very much depends on the actual leaders who are there, right?
Right.
And one thing I've learned personally since I've kind of changed a few companies that I help particularly over the last few years, is that if I don't enjoy working, if I'm not on the same wavelength with the leaders of that business, then I'm just gonna move on, because for me, it's really, life's just too short, and fundamentally is being able to communicate in the same language. So I think where I'm now and what I'm seeing is that if I look at the leadership organization there, the age profile of those leaders is very much similar, say, to mine. So I think that makes it easier. But also, I think they're quite excited and interested in these latest developments themselves as individuals. And I think that helps, because if there's then individual personal motivation amongst that group of people, and of course it needs to be brought back into the context of where's the business value, but if one can actually bring it to them and actually demonstrate to them how it can be done in the businesses similar to where they're leading, then I think that's kind of a very strong chance of success. So, but it does require a certain DNA of the individuals in the room there to begin with, because if you're talking different language, then it's just never gonna happen, because you're never gonna understand one another. So I think, to me, that's a prerequisite. That's kind of a given set of conditions to begin with. Once you've got a good common language foundation that you start with, then everything else then follows.
I think that's really interesting. Yeah. So it's sort of, it's not just creating a safe space. I hear that a lot, where, if someone's AI is coming into your job and they're going, please train the agent, you're like, okay, you've got to know, no, train the agent, because this is going to help you progress your career. Like you say, it's like a promotion, and then that to be a safe space, we go, yeah, I believe you. I've seen it. But that's interesting, that sort of the language. I see that a lot in AI as well, where we have terms like prompt engineering, right? Which I'm a big fan of. I'm like, you've got to learn how to prompt engineer properly. But all I'm really saying is how to construct a question. I mean, I'd never have gone to somebody who's searching on the internet or Google and gone, well, you need to do your prompt engineering on your search to get the right results. I mean, people know if you get the question right and you phrase it the right way, the system gives you a better answer. So I like that. That's a really interesting sort of piece. You mentioned leading by example, and you mentioned sort of bringing this stuff to life in the space of, finance and procurement and supply chain. Are there any examples that you're seeing at the moment where you see the leadership really doing that, where they're embracing AI within inside the team, or maybe the team's using AI for a certain way, or do you see sort of lessons learned? Nothing's perfect, and we're all making mistakes with this. Is there anything that you've kind of seen that specific to those business functions that you work
I think at the moment where we are at, we're kind of in the very beginning. We're exploring the possibilities, and I think there's a lot of good energy and appetite for this real kind of exploration phase to create this opportunity to go out there and engage with stakeholders like yourselves, to allow really that to translate into, please come and show us and educate us almost in a respectful manner, and tell us what are the others doing out there that we can actually learn from. And I think that's absolutely exciting place to be. And if I then translate it into, okay, what are the use cases for the potential application of that, I think again there's plenty. And because in the CPG companies I've worked with, particularly over the last 5 years, first was a brewing industry, then did a little bit with tobacco, now in the frozen sort of food industry. Fundamentally, these businesses have been in the line of trade that they're in and in that game for tens of years, if not hundreds of years, some of them. So for sure they know that there's always demand for the product that they manufacture. And I think over the years that they have grown, and there's quite a bit of, I suppose, probably even fat that then they carry in running these businesses. So there's for sure opportunity for where these use cases can be applied from an efficiency point of view. But like I was saying earlier, we're not standing still, and the industry is not standing still, and the leaders of the industry, they're already one step ahead. And that's another opportunity for, I think, these companies to go and look around and learn from what the others are doing and actually help them to improve their business performance by growing their top line.
I like that sort of the sharing. It's not just communication between leadership top and bottom, it's communication with inside the industry.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's things in the industry that you could all work together on that it would just help everybody. So that's interesting. If there was maybe one thing that you would want folks watching this to take away, sort of a this is what you should do tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then I'll bookend that with what's one thing I wouldn't do.
Right.
That you kind of learned the hard way.
Yeah.
If there is one that you're open and willing to share.
Well, I'd probably twist it slightly and say two things I want to take away on the positive side. If that's
you can take two on the positive, zero on the
so
perfectly fine.
One would be is that, look, the pace of change in the world that we live in is only going to increase. So I think for me, one takeaway, and that's kind of been a bit of my philosophical approach to life in general, I started reading this American futurologist. His name is Alvin Toffler. He's been writing from the 80s, right? He's got a famous trilogy of Future Shock, Third Wave, and then Power Shift. And basically, the underlying strapline in all of his books is saying that for either a nation or a business or an individual to be successful in future, one skill that they need to learn is their adaptability to change. So for me, one takeaway is that really approach this external, ever-increasing pace of change as something that we're going to have to learn how to live with in order for us to be successful. And the second thing that what we touched on for me is really, is a famous glass half empty and half full, right? So is it an opportunity or is it a threat? Again, I always look back at myself. I'm a forever optimist in life. My glass is always half full. So connecting back to what I was saying earlier, look at this as an opportunity. Don't look at it as a threat. And if you look at it through the optimistic lens in the context of liberating oneself from whatever they're doing, then you have the opportunity to enjoy the ride rather than seeing it as a threat, and then it's just going to become painful.
I think that is a perfect place to end. The opportunity to enjoy the ride. I think that is a fantastic line to end on. Thank you so much for joining us today. I learned a lot. I love the idea of communication and the leadership, finding the use cases, motivating. All of that helps us to get on the ride in the first place and enjoy it. So thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. So join us for another one of these where we're going to delve into different lines of business and understand how do we drive that motivation inside the organization to enjoy the ride of AI.